everybody, and welcome to the Emerging Screenwriters interview series. I am Shayna Weber, and we are super excited today across the world to have
Ariane, Hahusseau.
And I had Ariane say her name because I butcher it because you have a beautiful name. It is a lot of a name. So
Complicated French name. I know.
yes, but it's beautiful. It's beautiful, and it's beautifully written also. So
Thank you.
let's all get that name correct. How are you today?
I'm good, thank you. How about you?
I'm good, thanks. Okay, so this interview is pretty much all about you as a writer and your process, where you get your ideas from. So let's start at the beginning for you and talk about how did you first know that you were a storyteller or that you were somebody who wanted to be a writer?
I think I've always loved books and reading since I was very young because my mom always read to me and my sister. So I grew up loving stories. And then I think the first step I made towards writing was when I was around like 10, 11. I was madly in love with a boy who didn't love me back. So that was, first the first steps of knowing unrequited love started very early, and then I started writing like poems, heartbreaking poems about how I felt, and so I guess this guy launched my tragic poet's career, so and then after that, I like at school I always loved creative writing assignments. Whenever I could just write something that enabled me to go anywhere, and just be fully free. I loved it. And I started writing short stories, mostly in French. That's the language I am the most comfortable in to write short stories. And it's actually when I went to study in England, I went to study at King's College London. I did a literature master. And I watched even more BBC shows than I used to. And watching all those marvelous adaptations of my favorite novels, I realized that having a literature background, I could do that. I could adapt these novels that I loved, but I could also write my own stories. And was like the first bridge towards screenwriting. And and then I couldn't see myself not telling stories.
I love that. That resonates with me because I mean, I'm not as in touch with all the BBC series. I've only in my older years have I watched them, but I can imagine just from what I saw as a child, the love stories that I can only imagine just the plethora of like these BBC shows that you're just like, ah. And I know a little bit about you. I know that a lot of your stories are those love stories that come from that place of the heart. How do you, and they're historical, which I love. So how do you come up with your original ideas? Where do they come from? Do you like pull an inspiration from a character that you love, or like where do these awesome, amazing ideas come from?
So they're always, definitely settled in like historical times. I really love period pieces by default. And I think it's, through the books that I read, the shows that I watch, and like historical figures that also inspire me, particularly women. And I have a fragment of something, like there's a theme that strikes me that I think I haven't thought about before, or that I haven't seen in movies or read in books, and that I want to explore more thoroughly. Like for example, I'm particularly interested in art and the artistic process, the creative process, and so I write lots of stories about the rise and fall of the artist. And when I first wrote, the idea for the Unfinished Sonata was the terrible fate of the French sculptor Camille Claudel, who was locked in an asylum by her brother. And it was like the second half of the 19th century. And I was just thinking how terrible for an artist to stop her art, and be locked up and never sculpt again, even though it was her life and she was incredibly successful and gifted. And then started like what could I do? Could I write like an answer to that? Like maybe like a vengeance story? Like what would happen if she had gotten out of the asylum? What would have happened then? And that was sort of what, launched the story for the Unfinished Sonata, and I switched it to a pianist. But that's usually how it happens. Or I read an article and I'm just fascinated by a theme. Like for Shattered Faces, it was reading about Anna Coleman Ladd, this American sculptor who painted prosthetic masks for the disfigured soldiers of World War I. And I thought it was mind-blowing that art was finally at the service of people, instead of being just like sort of neutral, hang in a museum that, it's just pieces that you observe from a distance. Here, art was actually making these men's lives better. It was restoring their dignity and their humanity. And I had never heard that before. I had never seen it anywhere. And so I really, it was just fascinating to me. And it's usually these like little bits, and then I just get lost like down the rabbit hole of thorough research. I need to know everything about the time period, the subject, the people, if they're real historical figures or not, or if I just make them fictional so I can have more freedom. So then that's when I decide. But and then I just have to be passionate about the subject, and it's usually a theme. Redemption, vengeance, something like that. It needs to be, I don't know, really be a gut reaction when I research about it, and then that's what launches me.
Well, I think that people watching this can see that you do have a lot of passion. I think that, I've seen you pitch also, and what you give out, it's incredible. And I think that people could learn a lot just from listening to you sort of tell even that just inkling of a story of like where you come up with that idea. It's very magnetic. I have to tell you, you are magnetic. You are somebody who I buy into what you're talking about. I'm like, oh yeah, even if it's maybe not something that I'm like super passionate about myself, I'm drawn into you. So I personally think that you're just magnetic. And I think that one of the things I love too is I can feel your empathy. I can feel that empathic nature mixed with the passion of the storytelling. And I think that is such an amazing combination for a writer. So I mean, I see you going so far. I have to tell you that. That's why I was like, I want to interview you because I know, but you have such wonderful the ability to like pitch something. I was just listening to you going like, yeah. So congratulations on that.
Thank you. That's really
when somebody asks you, so this is always a question, that comes up for screenwriters in terms of like meetings and stuff. When somebody asks you to describe your voice or, what's your brand? What's your voice? What is your answer to that?
I have two. The first one is definitely period dramas. I can write period dramas from anywhere, any point in time. I'll just research and I love history. So these are the stories that shaped me because I read the classics. So I feel like it's a world I'm comfortable in. So period pieces, period dramas, particularly, something a bit epic, artistic, like a quest, that sort of, I would be attracted to. And I'm very literary in that genre. So I love writing. I mean, when you love reading, you love writing, and you admire like the style of your favorite writers. So you want to write like them. They inspire you. So I always try to write elegantly, something that would be like period, like period writing too.
Right, like the tone matches.
Exactly.
Obviously, yes.
Exactly, like as much as like the dialogue or anything.
Right.
And I think, and the second would be dark comedies, because I also really have like a dark sense of humor. I don't know if it's like my love for British culture, but anything that's like really dry and dark and like gallow humor, I think they call it, like anything that's got to do with death and illness and suicide. I love that. I will make a dark comedy out of that. So yeah.
Amazing. And then what is your writing process? How often do you write? Do you write all day? Do you write in little chunks of time? Like, what's your process? Do you outline? Do you just go on the page and see what happens? Like, what is your process?
I'm not overconfident, so I like to take like all the steps before writing, you know. I like to. So first of all, I think the first one is research, which is probably the easiest because it's the one that's got no boundaries. You can just research till the end of time, like the subject. So it's a safe space. And it's also very important because you're building your world. And I know for myself that I need to see it also like visually, and I need to sort of like smell it, see what it looks like, what it smells like, what it feels like to be in this world, like, I don't know, medieval Spain, like what did it feel like to be there? And then when I know, that's when I can finally sort of build my characters, my plot. So then I spend a lot of time brainstorming, getting to like stretch the characters on the page and try to understand who they are. And the plot usually comes last because I can't write plot if I don't know who my characters are. That's just, I need to know who they are first, how they will react, what they will do, their personality, so that I can write the plot. And then when I have brainstormed, I have to get out of that safe space and force myself to like go to structure and be like, okay, now where do we put things? So yeah, going back to the 3-act structure or whatever it is I'm writing. And then yeah, just putting everything, starting with like a beat sheet, and then growing, like making it bigger into like a treatment, and then an outline, and then like a scene by scene sort of document. The more precise I can be, the quicker I will be writing it, because I'll know exactly where I'm going. So when I feel safe, like I have everything planned and I know exactly where I'm going, I'm a very stressed and anxious person, so that sort of helps me. Then I start writing the draft, and it's usually by the end of it that I know what I'm actually writing about. Like there's this sort of revelation that comes at the end. It's like, exactly. Oh,
Rewind.
this
Yeah.
character is actually like that. Okay, that's not how I pictured him, but okay, I guess now he's got his voice. So yeah, once you reach that, you know, the end, it's like, oh, okay, now I've got more clues where I'm going. And then you have to like write it all over again. So yeah, it's all in the rewriting, but I'm not very patient, which is definitely a fault. So I tend to need to put it away for a little while, you know, because I get saturated with it and I can't see it, and I think it's the worst thing I've ever written. And then once I've, you know, had a break with it, I can safely return to it and be like, okay, scissors, where do I cut?
Right.
And then I start like the rewriting process. And yeah, whenever I feel like it's really, I find it awful and so bad that I want to rip it apart, then it's like, go back in the cupboard for a little while and then back at re-editing. So that's usually how I work. And then of course getting notes from people, because you need that sort of, make sure you're going in the right direction. And so yeah, lots of notes.
And do you start something else in between? So once you put that draft away, do you start something new, or do you take a break?
I can start something new. So it'll be like the early phases. So it's sort of, it's not really, it's not like I'm writing 2 drafts at the same time. I can write a draft and brainstorm on another idea, which will take me somewhere else. So it really depends. Sometimes it's comfortable to switch worlds. It's like, I need a breather from this one, I'm going to like delve into that one. This one's Scotland, 19th century, cool. Completely different. But sometimes it's also a challenge to sort of like, yeah, juggle from like world to world, and you're like, okay, where am I? Why are people wearing corsets in this one? And then like, oh, okay, then so you have to sort of know where you're at. But I can switch from story to story, but not just in the same phase.
So you're in France. How do you get your scripts out there? How did you sort of enter the American market for, you know, screenplays and networking and all of that? How did you go from where you're at to jumping over the pond?
So yeah, actually, I went to AFI. I graduated from AFI 3 years ago. So it was mostly keeping in touch with the connections I had made, the friends I had made during my studies. And then well, the ISA actually helped tremendously after like a couple of years of just nothing, trying to reach out to people and usually not getting any answer. I was really lucky to be the fast track fellow last year, and it was such a great opportunity to have this week of meetings. I met some great producers and executives, and actually one of them optioned my script. So I feel like that was such a big step forward, and nothing could have given me that except it's this week of meetings. So I was so grateful. Like the ISA is really the cause for a lot of like little success of mine for now. So yeah, and then it's just you have to force yourself to really keep in touch with people.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of like, I'm a shy person. I like to stay like in like the dark corner of libraries, like every good writer. Just so you have to sort of force yourself to be like, okay. And English is not my mother tongue, so sometimes I find it not challenging because now it doesn't take me any effort to speak English, but it's just, yeah, it's like like a barrier still, so I have to make that effort. And but yeah, I'm in France right now, sort of against my will because of like a visa situation.
Right.
But yeah, I will hopefully be back in LA very soon, because that's where I have all my contacts. So yeah, it's really, I think it's through competitions and festivals, even though my short film got into festivals during COVID. So basically it was no use. Couldn't go to any festivals. But yeah, you have to like force yourself to, submit to competitions and meet people and network. And it's hard, but I think, yeah, you have to force yourself to do that. It's part of the work.
Yeah. Tell me about your short film. Is it just writing by you, or did you direct it, produce it?
No, I am not a director by any means. But the story, I came up with the story, then co-wrote it with the director. And so then we'll lean more into my dark humor. But it's about two 70-year-old best friends who make a pact to kill themselves because one is a misanthrope, so he hates the world. Well, why live in it, any longer? And the other one is a hypochondriac, so he's so afraid of dying from a disease that he might as well die now to not be afraid all the time. But unfortunately, he has to the hypochondriac decides to break the pact, and so the misanthrope is infuriated. And so after lots of twists and turns, they sort of go on a journey where they reassess the value of life and friendship.
I love that. And how did that come to be? Was that through AFI?
Yeah. It was my like graduating short film.
Awesome. Okay, so let's talk about where you are in your career. I know you downplay a little bit of where you are and like minimize yourself a little bit, but where are you in terms of the number of scripts you've written and maybe where you want to be and what your 1-year goal, 5-year goal, big picture goal?
So I have about maybe 5 features and 2-3 TV shows, I think. And I'm writing a new TV show, and I'm like halfway through a feature. And so yeah, I think write more, definitely a good rule. Keep writing. And I wanted to like try to maybe write comedies that weren't as dark as I usually write them, because I don't know, I wanted to make that experience of writing things that were a little bit more commercial just to see, because I think because I write either very literary period pieces or very like dark comedies that maybe not everybody can stomach. I was thinking of maybe expanding towards more like comedy, still a bit dark because then it wouldn't be my style, but yeah, so more writing in that genre, try at least. And yeah, I would like to find representation,
Mhm.
which I don't have at the moment because I don't feel advanced enough to actually not use that help, to like, I need somebody to knock on doors for me, at least for now, and just to like expand my network. And yes, I wish so. I hope that my option script will be produced one day. I would love to have that credit under my belt. So hopefully a produced credit, and which would lead to more. So I'm hoping that more features, because I think I'm more of a feature person
Right.
rather than I don't know. I like the fact that it's got a beginning, a middle, and end.
Right.
Once again, it's like it's reassuring
Just
for
it just
me.
keeps
Like
going. Yeah.
exactly, I can sort of master the story. It's like within this bubble, and it
Right.
doesn't like so. Yeah. So I hope to work. I think more in movies than TV. But obviously, if I was accepted into a writer's room, I wouldn't turn it down.
Right.
So yeah, and I'm starting to get more meetings and get in touch with more people, and I got put in touch with a director from New York, which whom I'm writing something with now, and a producer friend of mine hired me to write an adaptation. Slowly but surely,
You're
things
doing it. You're doing it. Yeah.
yeah. so so yeah, hopefully all this will, come to something, and the movies will be made, and I will have like credits under my belt and maybe more freedom to choose. I would love to like go into the British film industry.
Right.
You've heard me chat about the BBC for ages because I admire their period pieces. They're just so good. So yeah, and this market I don't have access to now. Like I don't know anybody from England, so eventually maybe a door will open towards like the British film industry, but I'm trying first to have my foot in the door in the American French industry, and I'm hoping also like the French, because I'm French, I can write in
Hmm.
French, so hopefully that'll come handy. And I think that Shattered Faces is definitely like a sort of
Yes.
cosmopolitan, could be very like American French TV show. So
Yeah.
yeah,
It's a
fit
very
everywhere.
cool project. Who
Thank
are
you.
your heroes? Who would you really want to work with, or actors that you want to work with, or directors, or who are those people that you're like, ooh, that's somebody I'd really love to be partnering with?
Well, I've always loved Joe Wright's movies.
Me
That's again,
too.
that's
It's my favorite.
they're the best. Like he's so good. And not
I knew
only in
you
terms
were gonna say that. I knew you were gonna say that. He's my favorite director.
of
Like, I'll
I
anything I will watch. I love Joe Wright. Joe
I
Wright,
know
find us.
I'm so predictable. Yeah, I just not only in terms of stories, like I think he's got incredibly strong and complex female protagonists. They're always like
Yes.
women are always at the foreground of his stories, and they're always so complex, and he loves exploring art too. So like
Hmm.
theater in Anna Karenina, and like there's
Hmm.
just and like writing with atonement. So there's always art is always at the foreground of what he does, and I think the aesthetics of his movies are so beautiful. The
Totally.
music, I like he partners with Dario Marianelli a lot. He did the
Hmm.
soundtrack of Pride and Prejudice, which is amazing.
Yes.
So, and
We
having
could just
written
talk
about,
for hours. We could just be like,
you
the Joe Wright love fest. Let's go.
I know, and yeah, if Dario Marianelli hears that, like since the Unfinished Sonata is about a pianist,
Mm,
please just like put yourself forward. I
right.
need Dario Marianelli to write the score of this movie. Yeah, so Joe Wright I would love to work with him and like write. I feel like what I write could be really what he goes for. So
I agree. I
hopefully
agree.
one day.
Hmm. I
And
agree.
then Ricky Gervais for like
Mm.
on the
For
dark
the
side.
dark comedy side, yes.
Exactly. Like I love how unapologetic he is, and the fact that he pushes the boundaries of comedies, but I think for the best, like the fact that he says you can make a joke about everything, it only depends on the joke and how it's crafted. And I think it's just so right. And if you can't joke about like the darkest, most terrible things, then what's the point of humor? Like
Right.
life is already such a tragic mess. Like we might as well have a laugh. And I think that Ricky Gervais is not only a comedian and a filmmaker, but like truly a philosopher for me. Like I agree with everything he says and how he sees the world. So yeah, Ricky Gervais. And yeah, in the same vein, like Martin McDonagh also is, he's so incredible. I love, my favorite movies of is In Bruges. In Bruges is just the best movie ever written.
Love that. Okay, well, I think that is it. Thank you so much for sharing all of yourself with us. And I mean, I just feel like no wonder I reached out to you, because I think we have the same sensibilities. We don't write the same things. I'm much more of a horror, in the world of horror comedy.
Okay,
but
nice.
yeah, I feel like we're vibing. I like it. I always do. I liked you.
Absolutely.
So join us next time for the next interview. Bye, everybody.